Hour number 3, a beautiful day in the Music City. Alongside VFL Ramon Foster, I'm Will Bowling. Justin Hawkins, our producer, joined by VolQuest's Austin Price at this time each and every Tuesday. What's up, Austin? How are you?
I'm doing great, guys. How are you?
We are excellent, Austin. Joey Aguilar on campus, the film process beginning. What are the rumblings? Is he the best quarterback of all time yet, Austin? Does he have his Adidas stuff picked out in a year? What's the early returns on the film study for Joey Aguilar there in Knoxville?
Well, Joey being a one and done is is going to be a Nike guy.
That's right.
With Tennessee under Nike for at least the next year, and we'll see after that. But no, I mean he's hit the ground running. Spent a lot of time with coaches. Spent a lot of time with Josh Heupel. He's been throwing to some people that are still around the complex. Some kids are at home and taking advantage of the break they get in May, and some are still around. And so he's been able to do some things. But the biggest thing is just mentally compartmentalizing everything that's a change, because you're going from Appalachian State's offense to UCLA's offense to now Tennessee's offense in a matter of months. And I don't think the one change is that difficult, but I think when you start mixing three different terminologies, that could be a problem. So I think for him, it's just about familiarizing yourself with everything involved with Tennessee football right now.
And also, it's interesting that we were talking earlier this morning, like Josh Heupel's not had a lot of risk-taking quarterbacks, gunslinger quarterbacks that throw a lot of interceptions and take a lot of risks. How different of a profile is he versus other guys that Josh Heupel has worked with? Is this kind of a new challenge for Josh, maybe a little bit?
Yeah, I think anytime you're introducing a new quarterback, it's a challenge, whether they're a risk-taker or not. You could argue that sometimes, if you're too passive, that Josh Heupel's not going to want you to do that either.
Right.
And, I think in sports as a coach, there's that fine line between pass the ball and shoot the ball, to use it in basketball terminology. I mean, like, you don't need a volume shooter, but you also don't need somebody that's risk adverse to the decision-making process. And so I think, for Josh Heupel, he's trying to, kind of pick the brain, kind of figure out who Joey Aguilar is, and kind of go from there. Again, this is an open competition. If Joey Aguilar turns it over a bunch in fall camp, I doubt he'll be Tennessee's starting quarterback. And so, he's got to figure out a way to play within the framework of what Josh Heupel wants between now and really the 1st of September.
Austin Price with us this morning, VolQuest's on 3, talking some Vols. Austin, one way to combat a spotty quarterback and offense is with a real good defense, specifically getting after the opposing quarterback at the line of scrimmage, man. How are we feeling about a guy like Joshua Joseph and the crew that's behind him, man, with Caleb Herring and Jordan Ross too? Because on paper, those guys should be really good with the pedigree that they are and the experience that they have too. But how do you view that group going into this SEC play this fall?
I like the group. There's some unknown there. Caleb Herring has done just a very little in his couple of years here. This is a big year for him. He had a really nice spring before he had to have some cleanup surgery done there at the end of spring. Jordan Ross flashes, has to continue to build, but there's all kinds of upside there. And Josh Josephs is a guy who I think is motivated. There is no James Pierce, and I think that he's relishing the chance to be the guy in the room, and then a couple of the younger guys after that. But it's a group that I think, much like the receivers, much like some parts of the offensive line, there's some unknown to it, but there is some known there to Josh Josephs, and he has a real chance to establish himself this year as an elite pass rusher in this league.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned unknown, because one known commodity, man, in 2 summers in a row, the Vols will have projected 2 first-round defensive players. That one for this year is Jermont McCoy. I know he's coming back off the injury. One, where is he at with that? And 2, his expectation with this play, Austin, going into this fall. How soon do you expect them to get back in the lineup for the Vols defensively, too? Because that can mean a lot, especially with this offense, man, and how many questions it has.
Well, I mean, obviously he's going to try to push himself to be back as quickly as possible. I do think the addition of Colton Hood gives him some wiggle room. It doesn't have to feel the immediate pressure to be back by the start of the season. But ultimately, Jermod McCoy wants to be back as quickly as he can, right? I mean, nobody wants to sit the bench and watch from the sidelines. I just think for Tennessee's perspective, you have a little bit more, safety net there with Colton Hood's addition than you did before. And so Jermod McCoy is continuing to progress. I do not think he's behind schedule. I think in a perfect world, he'd be ready for the first game. I think in the best world for Tennessee, he is knocked a fraction of rust off and is ready to go when Georgia rolls to town week 3. But again, I think that's the best case scenario outside of the fact, he just is way ahead of pace and is ready to go for the first week. I think ultimately you just would like to have him feeling good, feeling confident in the knee when Georgia rolls to town.
For sure. Austin, I know taking an SEC coaching job in any sport almost is like becoming the president of the United States, the way it ages you and how it kind of sets up the stress level. So I know the stress is always there. I know the pressure's all the way there, too. But as much as happened so far with the Vols in the spring and Andrew with Jermod McCoy and the players that you lost and the experience on the offensive line, is there a little bit of cover over Heupel as it pertains to job security? And I know it's way too premature to mention that type of stuff, but the need to win in the SEC and just the SEC in general, as you had Urban Meyer saying he think the Big Ten has passed up the SEC. How do you feel about Josh Heupel in this role this year in particular with what he needs to do with the Vols?
I guess the question is, does he have some buffer because Nico left?
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in theory, right? But I don't think he's approaching it that way. I think he's approaching it with some urgency. I think, and honestly, let's call this kind of a challenge. If he goes out and takes either Merklinger or Joey Aguilar or George McIntyre, for that matter, and wins 10 games with, 3 guys that weren't pegged to be Tennessee starting quarterback, let's say March 30th, then – I mean, what does that say about Josh Heupel? I think he likes to play with a chip on his shoulder, or coach with a chip on his shoulder. I think that Josh Heupel sees this as a real challenge to kind of prove himself a little bit. And Tennessee in general, Ramon, always is better when they are the underdog in all sports. Like you go back to 2005, Ramon. You guys were preseason ranked 3rd.
Right.
How'd that season go?
Man, 5-7.
Now part of that is indecision at the quarterbacks. They'll spot 5 and 6. Let's not give yourself an extra loss. They only played 11. They only played 11 back
That's
then.
right.
Oh.
That's right. That's right.
But the point is like, when Tennessee's been kind of like thought of like, middle of the road, like how they'll be picked, come July in the SEC media days. Yeah. I think they always kind of perform better, and that goes to basketball, that goes to baseball. So I'm really intrigued by this team. I thought about this last night. This is the most kind of like intrigued, kind of like I'm really just fascinated to watch how this transpires since the Schaefer-Ainge quarterback battle in 04. Like that's the most. It really is for me. It's the most kind of like, man, I kind of excited to watch this like quarterback competition. Kind of see what this team looks like because nobody really knows. I mean, you lose Dylan Sampson. I like their running backs, but like you lose Dylan Sampson, he's the SEC Offensive Player of the Year. Your receivers are a bunch of unknowns. Some of your offensive line are unknowns. I'm excited to see what David Sanders does. What does Lance Hurd bring in year 2? Quarterback position, obviously. I mean, call me crazy. I just think there's a lot of intrigue with this team because of the unknown. Maybe they end up being 5 and 6. Maybe they end up going 10 and 2. You just don't know. And again, I don't think they're going 5 and 6 because of the schedule. But my point is like you don't know what this team can be or will be, and that's probably scary for some. But I also think it's exciting for others.
Austin Price of VolQuest's on 3, our guest this morning on Ramon and Will. So, Austin, this Adidas versus Nike thing has become a major talking point for Tennessee fans. And
No,
Yeah, I know. Yeah, right. Shocking. I know. And the
It was
idea
the Monday Night Chat last night. It dominated the entire
it did.
thing.
It totally did. And the idea that the additional amount of money could make up for, fans not having Nike gear to wear, but maybe even for athletes that are less interested in you because you're a Nike or Adidas school or whatever that is. Austin, you talk to a lot of recruits, and you have for a long time covering Tennessee and VolQuest. Do athletes care that much? Are high school football players not looking at Adidas schools because they're Adidas schools?
Maybe you remember, Will, you're so young, and Ramon, I'm not sure you would. Did you watch Jay Leno growing up?
A little bit.
He would do that segment on the Tonight Show called Jaywalking, and he'd go out there and do man on the street, do interviews. What if I did that at 865 live this week? I just went out there and I just there going to their car. Adidas or Nike? Would you not come here because of Adidas, or would you come here because and see what they say? The truth is to this point, and again, this is a different era where athletes feel more compelled to say how they feel.
Right.
But in the past, I don't think you could have ever said, well, Tennessee lost a kid or got a kid based off their apparel deal. No one knows that. I mean, you could make claims, but no one's ever come out and said, well, I didn't go here or I did go here because of this. That's just never happened with Tennessee. Now, I don't know if it would affect their ability to recruit. I don't know. That's a lot of fan speculation or whatever based off the fact that the fans just don't want to change.
Right.
If I had my druthers, Tennessee would be a Peter Millar school, but they're not.
I'm with you.
But the point is, like, I think for Tennessee, for Danny White, for the entire athletic department, it's about finding the right deal. And if somebody's offering you double the money of what somebody else is, and I don't think there's to that point where Nike has given them a firm offer or a firm rebuttal, I don't think even unless it's happened in the last day or so, Adidas had given Tennessee a written offer. But if you're just talking ballpark figures and the number is vastly different, you have to do what's best financially for your school. And Adidas doesn't have a lot of big power players, and that's a comment by the fans. Like, nobody wants to be with Adidas. Okay, but if you're Nike and you can't pony up to Tennessee without ponying up for all of the other Alabamas, Floridas, and so on and so forth, then, what sense does it make for Tennessee to take a bad deal? Right. They took a bad deal to get to Nike in 2014, but now they own a lot of the leverage. Tennessee sports is winning and everything else. They're having a ton of success. Obviously, the brand carries a ton of weight. They sell a ton of merch. Like, Tennessee holds the negotiating leverage. And so if Nike can get close or they're around, I'm sure Tennessee would like to potentially stay with Nike. But if it's grossly different, like, you have to make the best financial decision, especially in this arms race where you're trying to raise money for funding these players, especially the rev share coming sooner rather than later.
And Austin, I think that's the interesting part of it too. And fans remember those horrific smoky gray jerseys that Adidas tried to do with the checkerboard inside the numbers and all those things. And the caveat that you guys had in the war room and that we talked about with Hubs on Friday is that Tennessee still designs its own uniforms. Am I correct in saying that will still be the case regardless of who this new contract is with, that a UT person is designing what these things look like instead of an Adidas or a Nike person?
That's correct. Tennessee would own the leverage on, knowing the color was going to be correct, what the uniform looks like, all that stuff. Now, like the little earrings and stuff that go with it, the bells and whistles, the jewelry, so to speak, like how thick is the orange collar around the gray jersey or the black jersey. I think that's that's small stuff that people are going to nitpick versus is the orange right? If the orange isn't right, then, that's obviously a problem. Do you like the color of the smoky gray? Do they even keep smoky gray? Or do they just roll with black? Adidas never had the black combination because Tennessee wasn't doing dark mode back then. So, yes, Tennessee would have the autonomy and the full control over what they look like and the color and all of that stuff, if they elect to switch to Adidas or, I think if they stick with Nike.
Does this mean more branding, a bigger footprint marketing from Adidas if the Vols do go with them too? Because I'd expect them to be the flagship if this is the last negotiation. I think A&M is the bigger school right now with the biggest deal, but I'd expect more promotion from Adidas if that's the case.
Yeah, I would imagine if Tennessee elects to make the move, Ramon, that they would, be the flagship or one of the 2 or 3 top flagship schools with Adidas, and that means they would get a lot more, notoriety. They'd get a lot more, branding out there from a national perspective.
Does that affect basketball much, though? Because Nike has this pipeline, and they get them early as far as basketball recruiting and which schools you go to.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's a possibility. The one thing I do know in this era is at the end of the day, most kids are going to take the biggest amount of money. So, if it's not all the time, sometimes kids take less to go to a school that they like the coach better, or they, like the surroundings, or they like the education part of it better. But on the whole, the money plays a huge part in most of these deals. And if a Nike school is offering you $100,000 and an Adidas school is offering you $800,000, are you really going to the Nike school and making $700,000? And I'm just using round figures as the example. Like, you're going to go where you're going to feel like you get the best deal for yourself, much like Tennessee is trying to figure out what is the best deal for them with the apparel company.
For sure.
He is Austin Price of VolQuest's On 3, joining us Tuesdays at 8:20 here on the show at Austin Priceless, where you follow him on Twitter. Excellent stuff as always, Austin. Thank you, sir.
Most definitely.
Appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Austin Price, talking us off the ledge a little bit on Adidas. I think it's happening.
I think it's done. I think the deal is done, to be quite honest with you. Austin, he ain't give an answer, but he pointed to what we talked about earlier. The money in Danny White.
Yeah, it feels to me like even when Nike is given the chance to match whatever Adidas puts out there, the Adidas offer is that much more at this point. We'll see if that continues because Tennessee has leverage, but I think it's a bigger philosophical conversation. This is about more than just brands. It's about what are you willing to do to get a bigger pot to give your athletes. This is a new day and age with rev share and your need for more in your pot to give to athletes. At what cost are you willing to get more money?
It's almost the old, little statement, I'd rather be rich than famous. I mean, you can be popular with Nike, but you can be really rich by Adidas, though.
Yeah, sure.
That's the way it sounds to me.
615-737-1045.